Welcome to the first part of a special interview with Jessica Swann. Today we'll be discussing taking risks and how they can really change someone's life. This is That Interview Show. Okay.
Hi.
Okay, so hello everyone, this is That Interview Show. I've come up with the most creative names for my shows, so That Interview Show is the big one. I'm obviously Julian Meyers, the wonderful interviewer host, and today's guest is Jessica Swann.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, Julian. Thanks for having me.
So much stress now off because we can actually do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this will be a two-parter. The first part being a history of you, talking about obviously your life, the risks you've taken to get to the position that you are now. And the second one will be about Muslims and terrorism and the news and global media as a whole. Okay, so let's get started. I'll find my questions because I can't bother printing them all. Because it's like paper rattles too much, so I'm like, I'll just have a phone and look
cool.
Look cool, yeah, with my old phone.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So, just some basics of you. What is your profession right now?
So my profession, so I'm a consultant. So I have my own company called Jessica Swann Consulting, and I maintain 3 different jobs. So one of my jobs, which is how we've come to know each other, is being a teacher at Swann University, and I teach the business of media and global media industries. I also work as a consultant for the Australia Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry as the National Secretariat, and that deals mainly with trade. Well, not mainly, it's all about trade and relationship building between the Arab world, so there's 22 Arab nations, and Australia. Agriculture, education, anything that is an export or an import from the Arab world. So that's pretty much what I deal with there. And the third job that I have, which we're going to be exploring probably the aspects of that job a lot more in part 2 of this interview, is looking at understanding Islam and Muslims in an Australian context. So my position with Benevolence Australia, which is a not-for-profit organisation here in Melbourne, Australia, that role is Outreach Program Manager. So what does that mean? That means that I am employed with the organisation under a government funding grant. So Daniel Andrews, our Victorian Premier, has been extremely active in the field of inclusion and diversity. And so Benevolence was given a grant at the beginning of this year to deliver programs to the wider community here in Victoria, to metropolitan Melbourne and also regional Victoria, that essentially helping to deal with racism, helping to deal with inclusion and diversity, all under the banner of understanding Islam. So I know we're going to get to lots of questions later, which will probably be covered in relation specifically to that role. Yeah, so 3 jobs. That's what I do now.
Cool. Why do you teach just communication as a basic thing? Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Look at my smile. Why do I teach communications and media? I think it has become a natural evolution of my own career trajectory and also my passion and my interest. So I did my undergraduate degree here at Swinburne many moons ago. We're not going to talk about how many moons. But I did media and communications, double majoring in media and marketing ages ago. And when I finished my undergrad, I went and did an internship with the American Broadcasting Corporation in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the United States. Loved it. It was brilliant. And then, to cut a very long story short, I ended up moving across to the Middle East and working in broadcasting there for many years. So upon returning to Australia in 2011 with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, I worked with them for a number of years, reporting, as well as doing live talkback radio and a little bit of TV for 7:30. And whilst I still love the journalism in its true sense has a real important role. The fourth estate, keeping the bastards honest, so to speak. So it actually theoretically has a really important role. But, and there's a huge but, and of course you and probably many of the people who watch your blog, your vodcast, what are they called these days? What are you calling this? Interview. Yeah,
my YouTube work.
Look, we all know we're all kind of singing from the same unfortunate hymn book at the moment, and that is that journalism has changed. It's changed a lot. There's still a lot of brilliant people working in journalism, But because of the nature of technology and social media and globalisation, it's changing the way we do journalism. And whilst I thoroughly enjoyed my time in journalism, the ability to really think and go deeper and analyse and talk about the things that are confusing us, such as Islam and Muslims, global issues, getting to the heart of issues and engendering a much deeper level of understanding is becoming really difficult as a journalist. And that's to do with all the cuts. There's so many job cuts. There is funding cuts if you're working with a public broadcaster such as the ABC. And so what is the outcome of these cuts? The outcome is a lack of analysis, a lack of meaningful discourse that really helps the wider community. And what I've learnt over the many years, having worked now within journalism internationally and back here in Australia, I must have a core value that maybe goes back to my childhood, I don't know. I've obviously got some kind of a passion around trying to make a difference. It matters, it actually really does matter to me, because why are you doing anything otherwise? So that might sound very philosophical and esoteric, but for me, working within a journalism capacity where it's very difficult to get stories up that do engender a deeper level of understanding, listening to interviews, looking at the coverage of how people cover anything to do with Islam and Muslims, having lived over there in that part of the world among Muslim cultures, it's deeply frustrating, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help the lack of understanding that's out there. And I think that there's a huge appetite within the Australian community to understand, but we're not getting a media that engenders that level of understanding. So to teach, my very long-winded answer, I apologise.
That's all right.
To teach enables those conversations that are so vitally important that they're just not possible out in popular mainstream media discourse, because time is of the essence, money is of the essence, and unfortunately a lot of focus now is on clickbait, headline optimisation, and we simply just don't have public intellectuals really in this country either, like they do in Europe and in the United States. We have Waleed Ali, and he's great, but we're pretty thin pickings when it comes to intellectual thinkers that are on the public stage, so to speak, that do influence popular opinion. We don't have that in Australia. So to sit and teach at a university with young people whose minds are hungry for information, that's really enjoyable. There's a fantastic, it just feels good, you know, and I really enjoy it from that perspective. There is a troubling side to it too though, and that is, whilst you'll always have amazing students who are so talented, and you can see them straight away, you can see that they're going to do really well, there's also a growing cohort of students that are finding it difficult to reach the standard that's required at university, simply in their writing style. Now that matters if you're studying media and communications. It may not matter as much if you're into accounting or engineering, but if you are going to be a decent communicator, you need to be able to write. So that's something that I see that troubles me. But apart from that, it's really enjoyable teaching.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we had an interview a couple last year that went for 40 minutes. I wasn't expecting it to go that long. I mean, initially the show was like 10, 15 minute interviews, just basic stuff. And that one talked about literature and philosophy and all this kind of stuff. And it rambled. I'm like, this is what I want the show to be.
Yeah.
Like, I love listening to people talk. I love learning things. And so of course, you know, you were one of my lecturers for this year, and because of your lecture, I wanted to do this.
So great.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad it had an impact.
Yeah, well, definitely did. So much so that I want you to reiterate it, not just for myself, but for the audience as well. Yeah. So you did say in your lecture that you were initially going to, you know, do the conventional thing of like getting married to someone and then having a life like that. What exactly changed that made you what you are now?
Wow, that's a great question, Julian. Look, I think it was a really pivotal time in history. Have you ever heard of the term called the Black Swan moment?
Watching a film, does that have anything to do with it?
No, no.
Then probably not, no.
No. So there is an economic term that was coined by an economist by the name of Nicholas Taleb. It's called the black swan. And it's the notion that things can happen that irreversibly change society forever. And it was unforeseen. So 9/11, for example, is considered as a black swan moment. Mind you, now, with the information that we have, I think a lot with, and also with a lot of the revelations that have come through, whether WikiLeaks or, things like that, Snowden, I think we're starting to learn a lot more about the complexities of foreign policy and relationships between various powers around the world. Was 9/11 a black swan moment? I think many would still argue yes, in terms of its impact globally. But then others may counter-argue that by saying, no, hang on, we now know that there's evidence of collusion between various governments and so on, that were we to have known these aspects, then perhaps it would have been more predictable than this idea that this totally spontaneous event, the worst attack on American soil, killing near 3,000 people, maybe it might have been a bit more predictable. Some might argue that. But then I still think that there's a large cohort that would still say that it was a black swan moment. So why is that important to the question you've asked me? Because I was doing my undergraduate degree when 9/11 happened. I was also an ANZET flight attendant as well, so I juggled the two. And 9/11 happened, and then 2 days later, ANZET collapsed. So for me, personally, two major things happened. So there was a major global event, 9/11, and then the airline that I worked for, 11,000 people, 11,000 Australians worked for ANZET. We all lost our jobs literally overnight. I had woken up that day. I got in from Japan the day before and had gone to bed that night and woke up the next day, and I had to go back out, and I was flying out to Japan again. And I got to the airport and I had my hat on and my wheelie bag and my uniform, and I went to go into the ANZET terminal, and there was a security guard who said, "Sweetheart, there's nothing going anywhere. All your aircraft have been grounded. You better go back home." And I said, No, but I'm international. I need to get up to Sydney. And he said, "No, nothing is going anywhere. Doesn't matter whether it's domestic or international. ANZET is grounded." I'm like, okay. So I literally got back in the car and went straight back home, and I called ANZET in Sydney and I said, "Listen, I don't think I'm going to get to Sydney to get to this flight to crew the aircraft." And they just said to me, "We're too frantic trying to get people home who are stuck in hotel rooms around the international service that ANZET operated around the Asia Pacific region." So that was it. That was basically the end of ANZET. So it was shocking, for 9/11 to happen. Everyone was in a state of, I can't believe this could actually happen. And then on a very personal level for a lot of Australians, and certainly for anybody working at ANZET, it was like, oh my God, I've lost my job. And I never saw this coming. So to get to the point where I called off my engagement with my boyfriend, and I thought, oh, I'm going to jump on a plane and go across to the Middle East. It took a little while, because I think that sometimes in life we can make spontaneous decisions, but then other times you just need to kind of let things settle for a little bit and then reassess and go, okay, what am I going to do? So ANZET collapsed. And then I thought, okay, I'm just finishing my degree now. I'm going to the States and I'm going to do my internship. There was nothing really available in Australia at that time because we have 23 million people. America has 330 million. So if you just look at the comparison of those population numbers, that's also indicative of job opportunities as well. So here in Australia at that time, or Melbourne at least, I could probably look toward getting an internship in PR with the Royal Women's Hospital or Royal Children's Hospital or Telstra or something like that. I didn't want that. I wanted to do broadcasting. Through my network of friends that I had in the United States, I pulled on a whole lot of different contacts. Cut a long story short, I ended up in Salt Lake City with the ABC, and that was a fantastic opportunity. So I did that and had an amazing time there. And I saw a lot of things within the media landscape that both enthralled me and just offended me deeply on an ethical level. I remember one particular day, it was during the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, so therefore it's winter time. And this one particular night, there were there was going to be a huge dump of snow overnight. And for anybody who knows about snow conditions and road conditions, you know that you put salt on the roads to stop the snow from slipping. Yeah. But there were really high winds overnight as well. So what happened on the freeways and everywhere is that whilst the salt had been laid, it all blew away. So by 5 a.m. the next morning, which was the time that my shifts would start on the news desk, all the salt had been blown away, all the ice had formed on the roads, and there was carnage on the roads. There were so many accidents everywhere. There were a couple of choppers with the ABC, so we got choppers out to some of the worst accidents. You're talking trucks overturned, you're talking everything. And the scanners were going off about every 5 minutes. So in that environment, you're hearing the 911 calls, you're getting a whole lot of stuff via email, there's scanners that are going off, where you're hearing the coordinates, West 35th and 9th, there's a truck overturned, da 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 da. So as journalists, we know, right, I've got to get a crew out to cover that. And you've got to get it out before your competitor, NBC, was the competitor. And anyway, so there was one accident that happened about 7:30 in the morning, and we managed to get the crew out there. Because of the carnage on the roads, they didn't come back till about 11 o'clock in the morning because I just simply couldn't get back. The roads were gridlocked. Anyway, the adrenaline that was pumping in the newsroom all morning was amazing. It was the best feeling ever for a journalist. It's like, yeah, quick. There's all these stories. It's so exciting and super hectic, super high energy, you know, and it was pumping. And we were so competitive. ABC, we've got to get the story before NBC. Got to get it. Come on, get it out to air. You know, get the coverage. And we were doing live crosses to different things. It was really exciting. Anyway, the photographer, the camera guy, who was sent out to the accident that happened at 7:30, he comes back in and he's eating this donut. It was like this quintessential moment where you're just like, God, that's so vulgar. This dude is like eating a Dunkin' donut. Like this. It was so offensive. And he's drinking a coffee as well at the same time. And he walks past the news desk and I said, hey, did you get the story? And he's like, yeah, it was a fatality. And off he goes. It was just so vulgar. The way he was just eating his donut and, you know, it was just in that split second, and his profoundly just brutal response, that it made me realise the unethical nature of what had been going on all morning. We needed to get the story. It didn't matter that lives were lost. And, you know, even when the camera guy said, yeah, it was a fatality, chomping on his donut, my first thought was, well, wow, did the family know? But at least we got the story. Great, before NBC. Yeah, great. Isn't that great? So something happened to me at that point in time that hadn't twigged at any other point, but it was in his response that brought me back to some ethical space that mattered to me. And I just remember, quite literally, as if it was yesterday, I remember just sitting back into my desk, the scanners are buzzing and all this kind of stuff, and it was as if it had all turned into a haze. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there thinking, oh shit, I've got my degree, I've got my internship, we've got all the stories, but this feels so unethical to me. This doesn't feel right. Something is not feeling right here, because it doesn't matter about the fact that this was a fatality. What mattered was we got the story. So I actually had to go home. So I left early from my shift, and I was really moved by even my own lack of care and my own lack of empathy. So that was a really pivotal point for me, that made me become acutely aware of how the media functions, how important it is to get stories. In the media world, in journalism, there's a saying, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, so if there's drama, if there's chaos, if there's it's going to lead the news because it's interesting, because the normal person's not going to lead the news. Normal people are not interesting. It's drama, it's crises, it's terrorism, it's da-da-da-da-da. You know, that's what works. There's nothing interesting about the Muslim who's going to university, studying a law degree or studying any other kind of degree for that matter, who goes home that night, who just wants to meet someone really nice, get married, have kids, or do whatever they want to do, and just get on with it. There's nothing interesting about that person, yet that person represents the vast majority of people, you know, but that person's not going to make the news. Only fools or yahoos or good talent will make the news in that respect, which we'll obviously get to later. But so I was kind of, after that experience in the United States, I came home to Australia, and it was in the probably mid-2003 by that stage. And I remember one particular day I was looking at the BRW and the Economist magazines, and both of them were running very similar front page stories. Essentially, Islam and Muslims were systematically taking down world economies. Now, I'd finished my degree. I'd had enough experience in the broadcasting internship that I had to really be thinking quite critically about what I'm seeing here. Is it true? Is it not true? Is it justified? Is it unjustified? Is it fair? Is it unfair? Is it in the public interest? Is it not in the public interest? I was already thinking really critically about what I saw, which also played into an important subject that I actually took at Swinburne, which called for us to identify a big global issue that was very diversive. So there was a pro side and there was an against side, and you had to analyse the different types of media. So I chose the Kosovo War. So I chose the kind of media that was being pumped out by NATO, i.e. the US forces, and the kind of media that was being pumped out by the former Yugoslavian forces. Both people lying. Both media's lying. There's victims all over the place. From our Western perspective, we don't see all of the victims. When we read in our newspapers that civilian targets are not being hit, they aren't being hit. It was an accident. Oops. Oh, that was covered for about 30 seconds. Let's not worry about that. Let's talk about something else. And this is ongoing. And it's been going on for a good 100 years. And I was acutely aware of that as well. So, and I was really troubled by that. It was one of those rare moments when you're doing your undergrad, because most of the time you're like, oh God, this is so boring. How's it relevant in the real world? You know, it was actually one of those rare moments where you do an assignment and you're like, wow, God, seriously? Is this what's really going on in the world? And it actually changes your perspective about things. And it helps you to start to understand yourself and the world around you and how you fit in and where you fit in and what you're going to do about it. So that was an assignment that mattered to me, because I became acutely aware of propaganda and how it functions, and how manipulating ideas is very important for politicians, it's very important for the media, for the much bigger narrative. So I understood that at that point, combined with my experience, the unethical experience that I had that particular day, that we wanted to get the story before the NBC did. I had a combination behind me that enabled me to look at these two pieces of coverage in these glossy media, business type publications, and say, I don't think it's right. This idea that Islam and Muslims are systematically taking down world economies, which was pretty much what the front pages of the BRW and The Economist were running with. I looked at that and I thought, I don't think I know any Muslims, but I don't think I buy this either. Well, hang on, if Muslims are really doing this, hang on, how many Muslims are there in the world? Because if this is true, we're screwed. So of course at the time it was 1.3 billion. Now we're looking at about 1.6, upward of 1.8. There's a little bit of ambiguity around that 1.8 figure, but people generally agree to 1.6 billion. Either way, 1.3 at the time was a lot of people. That's like near a quarter of the world's population. And they're all systematically taking down world economies and blowing stuff up and whatever. We're screwed. But why weren't we screwed before this? Why didn't the world blow up 1400 years ago, if this is the case? It simply didn't make sense. So based on my experiences of how the media function, I knew that this was incorrect. I knew it was wrong. So I was really driven at that point to learn for myself. I wanted to walk in the shoes of Muslims and Muslim culture. I wanted to understand firsthand, who are these people? Is it true? Is it really misogynistic? Is it really about terrorism? Does it really sanction war? How does it work? I need to know more, because I'm not feeling comfortable about what I'm reading. And I'm not feeling comfortable with the popular narrative that's just like this avalanche of negative coverage about a particular group of people. So that was really the foundation for me to take what probably some people would consider as a significant risk. And getting back to your original question on this, I was engaged at that time to a really lovely guy called Adam. He was a former graduate in engineering here at Swinburne, and we didn't meet here, we met out at a bar somewhere, but anyway. And he was great, really nice family and everything, and we were engaged. And whilst we were kind of going down that path and, you know, looking for wedding engagement rings and all this kind of stuff, something in the back of my mind was just saying, I'm not sure about this. And it's not that I'm not sure that I don't care about him. It wasn't really about him. There was something in me that felt unfinished. There's more. There's just more that's out there that I just haven't, there's a nut that hasn't been cracked yet. And it's got nothing to do with anybody else. It's got everything to do with me, I think. And if I go ahead with this marriage, like all my other girlfriends were doing, getting engaged to their boyfriends and blah, 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 or being all very normal, for me, I just felt that if I did it, there would be a high chance that that nut that hadn't been cracked is just going to become really, really, really big. And not that the marriage wouldn't work out because he wasn't a fabulous guy, but the marriage quite possibly wouldn't work out because I felt that I hadn't explored something inside me that I knew needed to be explored. I actually think we're all like that. Whether we're brave enough to explore what that uncharted territory of our own minds and beings is another thing. So anyway, I did call off the engagement with the support of my mum, actually. She was amazing. She just said to me, sweetheart, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to do it. And that was it. She said, let's not try on wedding dresses today, let's go for a coffee. I said, okay, done. And so I never tried on a wedding dress, called off the engagement, and not long after that I sat there and thought, shit, what have I done? I've just said no to a really normal path in life. I've just said no to a really decent bloke and a really good family and, you know, a pathway to known success for something I don't even know what's inside me, but it's like an itch that needs to be scratched or something. At the time, I would refer to it as, do I want to choose the money or the box? Money or the box, you know, like an old-fashioned game show. Mm. So the money being, it's a predictable thing. It's a predictable path. Getting engaged, getting married, going down that path, it's predictable. Or do I want to choose the box? It could turn all to shit, but it could be amazing. Like so much better than the money, you know, and you have to take that risk. What's different in that regard is that you do actually have control over what you're putting in that box. That's what's different to a game show. So, and that's all about your tenacity, the decisions that you make, how much of a risk are you prepared to take, how involved in the world do you want to be, how big is your world, what is your identity, how game are you to work out who you are, and what steps are you prepared to take despite what society tells you is the right thing to be doing. So you've got to weigh all those kind of things up inside yourself, which is a hard thing to do. There's nothing easy about that. It's much easier to go with the popular thing. It's not necessarily going to make you happy though. And if you're aware of that from the outset, then, well, you obviously know what I did. So that really was a massive sacrifice in not going with the normal thing that everybody else was doing. And so therefore, when we choose to make a massive sacrifice in our lives, I think that there is an onus on us and our own mental health to make it worth it. You have to justify the sacrifice, whatever that sacrifice might be. So if you've broken up with someone, or if you've chosen to, drop out of this, or to choose that, or to do whatever, if you've had to make some kind of sacrifice somewhere, you better bloody make it worth it. And only you can make the box worth it. What are you going to put into that box? That's where your agency comes in. I'm not talking ad agency, I'm talking about your own personal agency. How much control over my own life do I actually have? How much am I prepared to take? How much responsibility for my own life am I prepared to take? So for me, being really troubled by how Islam and Muslims were being represented from a journalistic perspective, probably wasn't that much of a humanitarian empathy thing at that point. I was just pissed off at how the media functioned, because I knew how it functioned at that point. So with all things considered, I just thought, well, if I could do anything, now that I've called this marriage off, if I could do anything I want, like anything in the world, what would I do? May as well go to the Middle East. May as well. What else have I got to lose? The reason why I chose the Middle East is because I was deeply interested in the Middle Eastern region, obviously because of Islam and Muslims and stuff like that. But when Ansett collapsed, there was almost like a mass exodus of Ansett flight attendants and some pilots over to Emirates Airlines in Dubai. Some went to Gulf Air in Bahrain, and some pilots went across to Hong Kong for Cathay Pacific. But nonetheless, a lot of people from Ansett who couldn't be absorbed up by Virgin and Qantas went overseas. And so I did know people over there. So it wasn't as if it was just this crazy random thing to move to Bahrain. So I did get a job initially with Gulf Air in their training department, and that enabled me to get there. But my objective was to get to a mosque and to work out who are these people, what is going on, what's really going on. And so it was actually after 2 days that I arrived into Bahrain that I went into a mosque for the first time. But before I left Australia, just getting back to that taking a risk thing, I remember just thinking to myself, okay, this is a massive risk that I'm taking in my life. How far am I prepared to go? What am I prepared to do to take this need that I know that there's more for me in this world? How far am I prepared to go with this? And I actually imagine Mother Teresa, as obviously she passed away many years ago, but she was a nun, for those people who may not be familiar with Mother Teresa. She was a Catholic nun who, she headed up the Sisters of Charity in Calcutta, in India at the time, Calcutta. And part of her, part of the order, that the order of nuns that she was with, is that they take a vow of poverty. So they must live their lives in poverty and in service to others. That's a part of that, their kind of order of nuns. So she lived in this abject poverty-stricken area in the slums in Calcutta. And I thought to myself, well, imagine if I end up working with the Sisters of Charity as a volunteer, living on 2 buckets of water a day in Calcutta. Am I prepared for that? I thought, yeah, I'm definitely prepared for that. If that's what it takes. Am I capable of doing something like that? Yes, I am. No matter what the challenges are, I am capable of something like that. So I had already prepared myself for what I perceived to be an extremely challenging experience, to try and get to the heart of making a difference in this world, to find meaning and to find purpose and to do something good and to give back. Because when we do something good and when we give back, we actually get so much. When we do it, you just feel bloody good for doing good stuff. And we certainly don't have those kind of issues here in Melbourne, but certainly if you wanted to go into any Indigenous area in Australia, Utopia being the worst Indigenous area in Australia, the poverty is abject poverty. Dreadful. So that's even happening in our own country. But I was ready. I was ready for a massive experience. So 2 days in, and I went into the first mosque, and thus began what really has become, a journey over the last 14 years now. So, and it hasn't for a single second been unrewarding. Yeah.
Cool.
Oddly, that's like one of those things where it's taken all the small questions I was going to ask. So that actually, if I'm not wrong, that actually is perfectly good with ending probably the first part.
Great.
Because that's pretty much the idea of what I want to talk about for the first part of the life-changing experience you've been through. Cool. Alright, well there'll be a second part soon. I'll just keep it recording so I can just go straight into it. So, cool. There'll be a link in your Twitter and your LinkedIn account, if that's good. Yeah,
absolutely.
So they'll be down below if you want to find her. Yeah. And stay tuned for the second part. Awesome. Thanks for watching that interview show. Today I discussed taking risks and how that can really change someone's life with my guest Jessica Swann. This is the first part of a two-part interview. The second part will be out very shortly, if not on the same day as this interview. So feel free to like, share, subscribe for more. There'll be a link down below into a playlist for the rest of that interview show where you can watch plenty more interviews just like this one. Thanks for watching.